Shalom, everyone. Here we are, September 14th, 2024. And this is part 43 of the teaching in the book of Revelation, and we are in chapter 11. Chapter 11 is the exact middle of the book of Revelation. From now on, things are going to get deeper, faster. Things are going to escalate, and there'll be some things in here that probably some people will go, oh my. Some will say, oh my. And some are going to wish they hadn't heard it. But not. And so, but things are going to start getting a little bit deeper as we go. And so let's read Revelation chapter 11, the first 14 verses. We're going to end up spending most of our time on the first 4 verses, give or take. Give me just a sec here. Okay, we're in chapter 11. We just started. So Revelation chapter 11 and verse 1. And a reed was given to me like a rod, and the angel stood and said, arise and measure the temple of Eloah and the altar, and those who worship in it. Yet the court within the temple leave out, and do not measure it, because it is given to the Goyim, and they will trample down that set-apart city 42 months. And I will give my 2 witnesses authority to prophesy 1,260 days, being clothed with sackcloth. These are 2 olive trees and 2 lampstands that stand before the Adon of the whole earth. And if anyone seeks to harm them, fire comes out of their mouth and consumes their adversaries. And if one wishes to harm them, thus they must be killed. And these have authority to close heaven so that rain will not fall in the days of their prophecy. And they have authority to turn the waters into blood and to smite the earth with all plagues as often as they desire. And when they have completed their witness, the beast that comes up from the sea will wage war with them and will overcome them and will kill them. And their corpses will be on the streets of the great city that is spiritually called Sodom in Egypt, where their Adon was crucified. Some of the peoples and tribes and tongues and nations see their corpses for 3.5 days, and they will not allow their corpses to be placed in graves. And the inhabitants of the earth will rejoice over them and be glad, and they will send gifts one to the other because of the 2 prophets who tormented the inhabitants of the earth. After 3.5 days, a leavening spirit from Eloah entered into them, and they arose upon their feet, and the spirit of life fell upon them, and great fear was upon those who saw them. And they heard a great voice from heaven saying to them, come up here. And they went up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them. And in that hour, there was a great earthquake, and 1/10 of the city fell, and they were killed in the earthquake. The names of the men were 7,000, and the remainder were in fear and gave praise to Eloah who is in heaven. Behold, 2 woes have passed, and behold, 3rd woe comes quickly. Like I said, we're going to be spending most of the teaching today and probably next week on the first 3 or 4 verses. John, the apostle, is instructed to measure the temple of Yahweh and the altar and those that worship in it. The the measuring rod that he has given is called a shebet, S-H-E-B-E-T. Another word for it is scepter, S-C-E-P-T-E-R, the scepter. It's not a tape measure, it's a scepter, okay? Which is also a sign of authority or identity. He is told to measure the inner court and the Holy of Holies, but leave out the outer court. So let's read verse 1 and 2 again. And a reed was given to me like a rod, at the scepter, okay? And the angel stood and said, arise and measure the temple of Eloah and the altar and those who worship in it. Yet the court within the temple leave out, and do not measure it, because it is given to the Goyim, and they will trample down the set-apart city 42 months. Now, we're going to go into a lengthy reading of Ezekiel chapters 40 to 42 and the first little bit of 43. I know it's a long read, but we need to read it. I would say I would ask you to read it, but let me tell you here now, there are some times that works, but when it comes to a teaching like this, we need to read those chapters, because those chapters is what connects these first two verses in chapter 11 of Revelation. We'll never understand those first two verses unless we go to Ezekiel chapter 40. And so bear with me, I know it's a long read, but there are sometimes we have to do that. Okay, so Ezekiel chapter 40 and verse 1. In the 25th year of our captivity, at Rosh Hashanah, in the 10th day of the month, in the 14th year after that the city was smitten, in the self-same day the hand of Yahweh was upon me, and he brought me here. And the visions of Elohim brought me into this land of Israel, and set me down upon a very high mountain. Wherein was it? Where the frame of a city on the south. Notice the frame of the city, okay? And he brought me there, and behold, there was a man whose appearance was like the appearance of brass, with a line of flax in his hand, and a measuring reed stood at the gate. And the man said unto me, Son of man, behold with your eyes, and hear with your ears. Let's stop, read that again. And the man said unto me, Son of man, behold with your eyes, and hear with your ears. In other words, supposed to see and hear all these things. Or before, it was either right down to here, or you wrote down the saw, what you see. Here, it's writing down everything you see and hear. So this makes it, when you read chapter 11, Revelation, verse 1 and 2, there's something more here that we need to explore. That's why we're reading these chapters like we are, because it's crucial to understanding all this. Verse 4 again, and the man said unto me, Son of man, behold with your eyes, and hear with your ears, and set your heart upon all that I shall show you. For to the intent that I might show them unto you, you are brought here, declare all that you see to the house of Israel. And behold, the wall on the outside of the house round about, and in the man's hand a measuring reed of 6 cubits long, of a cubit, and the hand breadth each. So he measured the breadth of the building, 1 reed, and the height 1 reed. Then he came into the gate, which looked toward the east, and went up the steps thereof, and he measured the jamb of the gate, 1 reed broad, and the other jamb 1 reed broad. Okay, keep track of everything. We won't count them all, but the word measure is going to be used a lot in the next 2.5 chapters, okay? And every cell, verse 7, was 1 reed long and 1 reed broad, and the space between the cells was 5 cubits, and the jambs of the gate of the porch of the gate within were 1 reed. He measured also the porch of the gate toward the house 1 reed. Then he measured the porch of the gate 8 cubits, and the posts thereof 2 cubits, and the porch of the gate was inward. And the cells of the gate eastward were 3 on this side and 3 on that side, and there were 3 of 1 measure. And the post had 1 measure on this side and on that side. And he measured the breadth of the entry of the gate, 10 cubits, and the length of the gate, 13 cubits. And a border before the cell, 1 cubit on this side, and a border 1 cubit on that side, and the cell 6 cubits on this side, and 6 cubits on that side. And he measured the gate from the roof of the one cell to the roof of the other, a breadth of 25 cubits, door against door. He made also posts 60 cubits, even unto the posts of the court and the gates round about. And from the forefront of the gate of the entrance and the forefront of the inner porch of the gate were 50 cubits. And there were narrow windows to the cell, to their posts within the gate round about, and likewise to the arches and windows round about inward, and upon each post were palm trees. Then brought he me into the outer court, and behold, there were chambers and a pavement made for the court round about. 30 chambers were upon the pavement, and the pavement was by the side of the gates, corresponding unto the length of the gates, even the lower pavement. Then he measured the breadth from the forefront of the lower gate into the forefront of the inner court without 100 cubits eastward, and also northward. And the gate of the outer court that looked toward the north, he measured the length thereof and the breadth thereof. And the cells thereof were 3 on this side and 3 on that side, and the posts thereof and arches thereof were after the measure of the first gate. The length thereof was 50 cubits, and the breadth 5 and 20 cubits. And the windows thereof, and the arches thereof, and the palm trees thereof were after the measure of the gate that looks toward the east, and it was ascended by 7 steps, and the arches thereof were before them. And there was a gate to the inner court over against the other gate northward, as also eastward. He measured from gate to gate 100 cubits. And he led me toward the south, and behold, a gate toward the south, and he measured the posts thereof, and the arches thereof according to these measures. And there were windows in it, and in the arches thereof round about like those windows. The length was 50 cubits, and the breadth 5 and 20 cubits. And there were 7 steps to go up to it, and the arches thereof were before them. And it had palm trees, one on the side and another on that side, upon the posts thereof. And there was a gate to the inner court toward the south, and he measured from gate to the gate toward the south 100 cubits. Then he brought me to the inner court by the south gate, and he measured the gate according to these measures, and the cells thereof, and the posts thereof, and the arches thereof according to these measures. And there were windows in it, and in the arches thereof round about, and it was 50 cubits long and 5 and 20 cubits broad. And there were arches round about, 5 and 20 cubits long and 5 cubits broad. And the arches thereof were toward the outer court. The palm trees were upon the posts thereof, and the going up into it had 8 steps. And he brought me into the inner court toward the east, and he measured the gate according to these measures. And the cells thereof, and the posts thereof, and the arches thereof, according to these measures. And there were windows therein, and in the arches thereof round about, 50 cubits long and 5 and 20 cubits broad. And the arches thereof were toward the outer court. Palm trees were upon the posts thereof, and on the side and on that side, and the going up to it had 8 steps. And he brought me to the north gate, and he measured it according to these measures. The cells thereof, the posts thereof, and the arches thereof, and there were windows therein round about. The length was 50 cubits, and the breadth 5 and 20 cubits. And the posts thereof were toward the outer court. Palm trees were upon the posts thereof on this side and on that side, and the going up to it had 8 steps. And a chamber with the entry thereof was by the post. At the gates there was the burnt offerings to be washed. And in the porch of the gate were 2 tables on this side, 2 tables on that side, to slay thereon the burnt offering and the sin offering and the guilt offering. And on this one side without, as one goes up into the entry of the gate toward the north, were 2 tables, and on the other side of the porch of the gate were 2 tables. 4 tables were on this side, 4 tables on that side. By the side of the gate, 8 tables were upon to slay the sacrifices. Moreover, there were 4 tables for the burnt offering of the hewn stone, 1.5 cubits long, and 1.5 cubits broad, and 1 cubit high, whereupon to lay the instruments with which the burnt offering and the sacrifice were slain. And the slabs, a handbreadth long, were fastened within round about, and upon the table was to be the flesh of the offering. And without the inner gate were chambers for the guard in the inner court, which was at the side of the north gate, and their prospect was toward the south, one at the side of the east gate, having a prospect toward the north. And he said to me, this chamber, whose prospect is toward the south, is for the Kohanim, the keepers of the charge of the house. And the chamber whose prospect is toward the north is for the Kohanim, the keepers of the charge of the altar. These are the sons of Zadok, who from the sons of Levi come near to Yahweh to minister unto him. And he measured the court 100 cubits long, 100 cubits broad, 4 square, and the altar was before the house. Then he brought me to the porch of the house, and measured each post of the porch, 5 cubits on this side, 5 cubits on that side. And the breadth of the gate was 3 cubits on this side, 3 cubits on that side. The length of the porch was 20 cubits, and the breadth 11 cubits. And it was by steps that was ascended, and there were pillars by the post, one on this side and the other on that side. Okay, now before we go on, Ezekiel chapter 40 to the end of the book, 48, chapter 48. This is all describing the millennial temple where Yeshua will be reigning from. This is describing it, and all these things are given in detail in the first 5 books of the Bible. But there's a reason why this is all mentioned. And when we get done with the book of Revelation, there's going to be a lot of wows. Even for me. Even, and I've studied this, and every time I go at it, wow. And so all this, chapter 40, 41, 42, and a couple verses in chapter 43, when you read these first 2 verses in Revelation 11, that's just a summation of what we're just reading now. And then I'll give you a handout here in a moment so you can better understand what we're looking at, okay? Because this is, this whole thing is being described as a bride and a bridegroom. Okay, so let's keep reading chapter 41. And he brought me to the temple and measured the post, 6 cubits broad as on one side, 6 cubits broad on the other side, which was the breadth of the tent. And the breadth of the entrances was 10 cubits, and the sides of the entrance were 5 cubits on one side, 5 cubits on the other side. And he measured the length thereof, 40 cubits, and the breadth 20 cubits. Then went he inward and measured each post of the entrance 2 cubits, and the entrance 6 cubits, and the breadth of the entrance 7 cubits. And he measured the length thereof 20 cubits, and the breadth 20 cubits before the temple. And he said unto me, this is the most set apart place. Keep that in mind, the most set apart place. Because we'll be covering that in a few minutes in more detail. Verse 5. Then he measured the wall of the house 6 cubits, and the breadth of every side chamber 4 cubits round about the house on every side. And the side chambers were one over another 33 times. And there were cornices in the wall, which belonged to the house for the side chambers round about, that they might have hold therein and not have hold in the wall of the house. And the side chambers were broader as they wound about higher and higher. For the winding about the house went higher and higher round about the house. There, and the breadth of the house continued upward. So one went up from the lowest row to the highest by the middle. I saw also that the house had a raised basement round about. The foundation of the side chambers were a full reed of 6 cubits to the joining. The breadth of the outer wall, which belonged to the side chambers, was 5 cubits, for that which was left by the structure of the side chambers that belonged to the house. And between the chambers was a breadth of 20 cubits round about the house on every side. And the doors of the side chambers were toward the place that was left, one door toward the north, one another toward the south, and the breadth of that place was left was 5 cubits round about. And the building that was before the separate place at the side toward the west was 70 cubits broad, and the wall of the building was 5 cubits thick round about, and the length thereof 90 cubits. And he measured the house 100 cubits long, and the separate place, and the building with the walls thereof 100 cubits long. Also the breadth of the face of the house of the separate place toward the east, 100 cubits. And he measured the length of the building, therefore, before the separate place, which was at the back thereof, and the galleries thereof on the one side and on the other side, 100 cubits. Now the temple and the inner place and the porches of the court, the jambs and the narrow windows and the galleries that had 3 round about. Over against the jambs there was a veneering of wood round about, and from the ground up to the windows, and the windows were covered. To the space above the door, even to the inner house, and without, on all the wall round about, within and without by measure. And it was made with cherubim, the palm trees, and a palm tree was between cheruv, and every cheruv had two faces. So that there was the face of a man toward the palm tree on the one side, and the face of a young lion toward the palm tree on the other side. Thus that was made through all the house round about. From the ground unto the door were cherubim, palm trees made, and so on the wall, of the temple. As for the temple, the jambs were squared, and the face of the sanctuary had appearance such as the appearance. The altar, 3 cubits high, and the length thereof 2 cubits, was of wood. So the corners thereof, the length thereof, and the walls thereof were also of wood. And he said unto me, this is the table that is before Yahweh. And the temple and the sanctuary had 2 doors. And the doors had 2 leaves apiece, 2 turning leaves, 2 leaves for the one door, 2 leaves for the other door. And there was made on them, on the doors of the temple, cherubim, palm trees, like as were made upon the walls. And there were thick beams of wood upon the face of the porch without, and there were narrow windows, the palm trees on the one side, and on the sides of the porch, there were also the brackets of the house and the thick beams. Chapter 42. Then he brought me forth into the inner court, the way toward the north, and brought me to the chamber that was over against a separate place, which is over against the building toward the north, even to the front of the length of 100 cubits, with the door on the north and the breadth of 50 cubits. Over against the 20 cubits, which belonged to the inner court, and over against the pavement, which belonged to the outer court, with gallery against gallery and 3 stories. And before the chambers was a walk of 10 cubits inward, a way of 1 cubit, and the doors were toward the north. Now the upper chambers were shorter, for the galleries took away from them, from these, more than the lower, and the middlemost in the building. For they were in 3 stories, and they had not pillars as the pillars of the courts. Therefore, room was taken away from the lowest and the middlemost in comparison with the ground. And the wall that was without by the side of the chambers toward the outer court, in front of the chambers, the length thereof was 50 cubits. For the length of the chambers that were toward the outer court was 50 cubits, and behold, before the temple were 100 cubits. And from under these chambers was the entry on the east side, as one goes from the outer court. And the breadth of the wall of the court toward the east, before the separate place, and before the building there were chambers, with the way before them like the appearance of the chambers which are toward the north, as long as they and as broad as they, with all their goings out, and according to their fashions, and as the doors. So are also the doors of the chambers that were toward the south. There was the door in the head of the way, even in the way directly before the wall, toward the way from the east, as one enters into them. Then said he unto me, the north chambers and the south chambers, which are before, is a separate place. They are the set-apart chambers, where the Kohanim that are near unto Yahweh shall eat the most set-apart things. They shall lay the most set-apart things, and the meal offering, and the sin offering, and the guilt offering, for the place is set apart. When the Kohanim enter in, they shall not go out of the set-apart place into the outer court, where they shall lay their garments wherein they minister, for they are set apart. And they shall put on other garments, and shall approach to that which pertains to the people. Now, let's read that verse again. When the Kohanim enter in, they shall not go out of the set-apart place into the outer court, but there they shall lay their garments wherein they minister, for they are set apart. And they shall put on other garments, and shall approach to that which pertains to the people. Okay, that's in the outer. That's I'll explain that when we get our handout. But that going out to the camp and the outer court of the temple. Anyway, it'll make more sense once we go through the handout. Verse 15, now when he had made an end of measuring the inner house, he brought me forth by the way of the gate, whose prospect is toward the east, and measured it round about. He measured the east side with the measuring reed, 500 reeds, with the measuring reed round about. He measured the north side, 500 reeds, with the measuring reed round about. He measured the south side, 500 reeds, with the measuring reed. He turned about to the west side and measured 500 reeds with the measuring reed. He measured it by the four sides. It had a wall round about, the length 500 and the breadth 500 to make a separation between that which was set apart and that which was common. This is where the guests of the wedding will be. The servants of the wedding will be. And I'll explain that in just a little bit more in 5-10 minutes. Because that's important. There are guests at the wedding. The bride and the bridegroom are the only ones that stand under the chuppah. Okay, so these ministers are going to be ministering to the people that are not in the court or in the camp of Israel. So we'll just read just a few verses in 43. Chapter 43, afterward he brought me into the gate, even the gate that looks toward the east, and behold, the glory of the Elohim of Israel came from the way of the east, and his voice was like the sound of many waters, and the earth did shine with his glory. And the appearance of the vision which I saw was like the vision that I saw when I came to destroy the city. And the visions were like the vision that I saw by the river, Kavar. And I fell upon my face. And the glory of Yahweh came into the house by the way of the gate, whose prospect is toward the east. And the Spirit took me up and brought me into the inner court. And behold, the glory of Yahweh filled the house. And I heard one speaking unto me out of the house, and a man stood by me, and he said unto me, Son of man, this is the place of my throne, and the place of my soles and my feet, where I shall dwell in the midst of the children of Israel forever. The house of Israel shall no more defile my set apart name, neither they nor their kings, nor by their harlotry, by their carcasses of their kings and their high places, and the setting of their threshold by my threshold, and their doorpost beside my doorpost, and there was but the wall between me and them. And they have defiled my set apart name by their abominations which they have committed, wherefore I have consumed them in my anger. Now let them put away their harlotry and the carcasses of their kings far from me, and I will dwell in the midst of them forever. We'll stop for just a moment. Talking about all these leaders in the Knesset in Israel, and some other spiritual leaders. So let's keep reading. We're just read another 3 or 4 verses here. You, son of man, show the house to the house of Israel, that they may be ashamed of their iniquities, and let them measure accurately. And if they be ashamed of all that they have done, make known unto them the form of the house, the fashion thereof, and the goings out thereof, the coming in thereof, and all forms thereof, and the ordinance thereof, and all the forms thereof, and all the Torahs thereof, and write it in their sight, that they may keep the whole from thereof, a form thereof, and all the ordinances thereof to do them. This is the Torah of the house upon the top of the mountain. The whole limit thereof round about shall be most set apart. Behold, this is the Torah of the house. Okay, now, I know that was a long read. Let's go back and read Revelation, verse 1 and 2. And a reed was given to me like a rod, and the angel stood and said, Arise and measure the temple of Eloah, and the altar, and those who worship in it. At the court within the temple, leave out and do not measure it, because it is given to the Goyim, and then trample down the set apart city 42 months. So we see, just what we read a little bit there in Ezekiel, what's going to happen when they start to build the next temple, set the altar up. There's some things that's going to happen. Yahweh says, after this, when I come back and establish this, there'll be no more king to defile my place, my holy place. Is referring to members of the Knesset, Sanhedrin in Israel today, and other spiritual leaders in Israel. The prophecies in Ezekiel that precede this measuring, as well as those that come after it, are the same prophecies being described in Revelation chapter 11. Verbatim.
Wow.
Verbatim. Likewise, Ezekiel does his measuring in what's called a prophetic order. It's just like what we read, a prophetic order. That is identical to what's contained in the book of Revelation, verbatim. The word translated into English as measure is the Hebrew word midah, like M-I-D-D-A-H, midah. In Hebraic understanding, that word also means to measure a portion. What's being talked about here is a portion of the groom's inheritance. The groom's inheritance. That's why the first verse is so critical in understanding this whole message about the bride and the bridegroom. Again, so what's being talked about here is a portion of the groom's inheritance, which he traditionally gives to the father of the bride to pay the bride's price, right? The portion of the temple that John is asked to measure is a part of the tabernacle or temple that was always covered. The rest of the tabernacle sections were not covered. This covering clearly represents the chuppah under which the bride and the bridegroom stand during the marriage ceremony. And so we have a picture of Yeshua measuring or separating out, if you will, those people who are actually his bride. He is identifying those who measure up because they lived their lives according to Elohim's instructions in the Torah and therefore qualify to be a part of his bride. They qualify to be a part of his bride. This passage could just as well read, "A scepter was given to me to go identify those I have selected and purchased, those under the chuppah, those who are my bride." And this is further solidified when you read Revelation 11, 1 and 2. So let's read it again. Verse 1, "And the reed was given to me like a rod, and the angel stood and said, Arise and measure the temple of Eloah and the altar and those who worship in it. Yet the court within the temple leave out and do not measure it, because it is given to the goyim that they will trample down the set-apart city 42 months. So what's very interesting, we've talked about before, in Aramaic, wherever it says the word measure or do not measure, is actually the word Mashiach. And the word Messiah means anointed. The word Mashiach means anoint. So let's read it in the way that is more palatable, what we just read in the book of Ezekiel. "And the rod was given unto me, and the angel said, Arise and anoint the temple of Eloah, anoint the altar, and anoint those who worship in it. Yet the court within the temple leave out and do not anoint it, because it is given to the goyim, and they will trample down the city 42 months. So the word anoint actually is pretty revealing. It's pretty revealing. Anyway, at the same time, John is told not to measure the outer court. And that's where the servants and the guests of the wedding party stand. Remember in Revelation chapter 7? And the great multitude stood before them. And they're specifically not being measured for this relationship. These are people who have not vehemently said the Torah is done away with, or Old Testament is not done away with. But yet they say it's not relevant for today. But if they're not dogmatic about it, then they have what some of an open eye or an open ear. Those are the people who will be the guests and servants at the wedding.
They'll be saved.
They're saved, but they're not the bride. They're guests at the wedding. And that's why it says, leave out and do not anoint that court. Okay, so also remember that the tabernacle structures, including the camp surrounding it, was laid out in 4 sections. So Sandy, if you want to hand these out. I was having trouble with my printer and my computer, so I had to send this to Sandy's laptop and then reprint it from there, because the format we see on here is different than when I laid it out. So I got to get a hold of Brian and see why the computer, well, Brock can do it, find out why the computer is not talking to my printer right. Anyway, that's another issue.
Let's uninstall the driver. Uninstall the driver and install it.
What's that?
Uninstall the driver and reinstall it.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay, so now, everyone got their handout? Okay. So again, I'm gonna say, the tabernacle structure, including the camp surrounding it, was laid out in 4 sections. Each one represents a different level of intimacy with God, and thus they each correspond to one of the 4 levels of the covenant. And so, Brock, I'll get you get you a copy and stuff like that and handout. So, let's read the top part, which I just read, and we'll read it so we can go down. Remember, well, let's read that paragraph again. The tabernacle and the temple structure, including the camp surrounding it, was laid out in 4 sections. Each one represented different levels of intimacy with Elohim, and thus they each correspond to one of the 4 levels of the covenant. Remember, we have the servanthood covenant, friendship covenant, inheritance covenant, and the marriage covenant. Okay. So number 1, the main camp, that's where everyone outside the court is. That equals the servanthood covenant. So we move in closer to the Holy of Holies. So the next one is the outer court. That equals the friendship covenant. Number 3, we have the inner court. That equals to the inheritance covenant. That's where Zechariah did the incense ceremony, right? Okay. Number 4, the Holy of Holies equals the marriage covenant. So it's progressive. Cap, first one, people are saved, but they're just not members of the bride. Same way at 2 and 3. Okay. So remember the paragraph down below, that the people who are believers positioned in the outer court are not being measured to see whether they qualify as part of the bride. In fact, they're not even being measured or anointed to see whether they qualify as part of the bride. In fact, they're not even be allowed into that most intimate private room, and the reason is quite clear. They are not part of the bride. They are the friends and the servants, essentially the guests of the wedding party, standing where the guests traditionally stand. Remember, not everyone who attends an ancient Hebrew wedding is either the bride or the groom. And those who are not of the bride or the groom are positioned anywhere else except under the chuppah. And so now you see there's much more meaning to those first 2 verses in Revelation chapter 11. Because you see, if we don't get the full, backdrop of those 2 verses, we could read into that almost anything you wanted to. But we got to use scripture to show where that came from. And yes, it's a long read to read Ezekiel 40, 41, 42, and some of 43. But that gives you then the complete background and the full context of 11, chapter 1 and 2 of Revelation. That's where it's coming from. And then when you read the book of Ezekiel, it's quite a system that Yeshua has set up when he comes back. So again, what we just read, there's a direct linkage here to Revelation 11, what John introduced in Revelation chapter 8. Okay, it's like the toe bone's connected to the head bone, right? Everything in between, right? Okay. So remember, the references in chapter 8 to the morning and evening services in the heavenly temple, corresponding to the same services that were conducted in the earthly temple in Jerusalem. Remember also the silence in heaven and what it represented. So let's go back to chapter 8, Revelation chapter 8, verse 1 to 4. Revelation chapter 8, 1 to 4. And when he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about a half an hour. And I saw seven angels who were standing before Eloah. Seven shofrim were given to them, and another angel came and stood by the altar, and he had a censer of gold, and much incense was given to him, that he might offer the prayers of the set apart ones on the altar that is before the throne. And the smoke of the incense went up with the prayers of the set apart ones from the hand of the angel before Eloah. So that is pretty revealing, because after Zechariah offered the incense, or any of the priests that did the offering the incense, there was a space of a half an hour that the people prayed in silence. It's like sometimes you go to church or service, and the leader, the pastor, the rabbi, whoever, the teacher will say, okay, let's have a moment of silence. Well, this moment of silence is 30 minutes, if you will. And then Zechariah would appear, and meanwhile, the people outside were praying for that half hour. Altar of incense represents the prayers of the people. That's why it's such a sweet smelling savior unto the Lord. So there's that space of a half hour. So this initial portion in Revelation 11 links directly to that passage again. And again, here we're at the temple, chapter 11, 1 and 2, except that this time we are being shown who is where, with all the obvious implications as to why those people are where they are. So that graph I just give you, that chart, is really important. Okay. The word translated as those who worship is called Mishtachkavim. Mishtachkavim. But these are not regular worshipers, because they're inside the inner court and even the Holy of Holies. And as we all know, only the priests are allowed inside the inner court, and only one priest at a time is allowed inside the Holy of Holies. And even then, when it happens on just one day a year on Yom HaKippurim, it's understood that the high priest on Yom Kippur, dressed in white like a bride, represented the bride. Okay. By the way, in case you forgot, when Yeshua died on the cross, on that execution stake, there was a curtain that tore in the holy place. And which curtain was it? Was it the outer curtain that revealed where the altar of incense would take place, or was it between the holy place and the Holy of Holies? It's a curtain between the inner court and the Holy of Holies, because people still not can see in where the inner court is. They couldn't see it. And so that gave free access then to the believers. And that's why, again, why this little graph thing is so important. So the implication is that these worshipers are his bride, fully qualified to be under that chuppah in the inner court. Go to Joel chapter 2, verse 15 and 16. Joel chapter 2, verse 15 and 16. Remember, chapter 2 of Joel, is set in the chronicle sequence of events. It's exactly how things have happened. We're not going to read the whole thing, but just those verses, verse 15 and 16. Joel 2, verse 15 to 16. Oh, wait, just till you get there. Okay, Joel chapter 2, verse 15. Blow the horn in Zion, sanctify a fast, call a solemn assembly. Gather the people, sanctify the assembly, assemble the elders. Gather the children and those that suck the breast, that the bridegroom go forth out of his hedar, and the bride out of her chuppah. Verse 15 tells us exactly what day of the year this is, Yom Kippur. That is the only time that this happens, when the sanctify a fast, they call a solemn assembly. And then verse 17 says, let the Kohanim, the ministers of Yahweh, weep between the porch and the altar, etc. That happens only once a year on Yom Kippur. So we see right there that the bride was already there, and they come out of the wedding chamber on Yom Kippur. Book of Zechariah tells us that when Yeshua steps down on the Mount of Olives, that day is Yom Kippur. The judgment of sheep and goats in Matthew, that's all happens at the same time. That is Yom Kippur. So when did the bride and bridegroom go into the chuppah? Rosh Hashanah. That's what it says in the beginning of the chapter 2 of Joel. But we're not going to go there right now. Now, the word for bride is challah. Not like what we make, but like the bread we make, Sandy makes. It's spelled C-H-A-L-L-A, challah. The bride is called kala, K-A-L-L-A-H, kala. Even though it's similar, challah, kala. One spits, the other one doesn't. Okay? So now the word again for bride is challah. The word also means completion, perfection, finished, to be made whole, and to be prepared. Incredibly enough, at the same time, it also means to be destroyed, to consume, or even to perish, depending on context. So, how and why can one word mean both perfection and destruction at the same time? Glad you asked. The answer is that there are two brides. One, the first bride is the one who has been perfected by Yeshua's righteous work, complemented by her sincere and heartfelt response to him. By virtue of Yeshua's blood on the cross, plus her own righteous conduct, this bride has been perfected and her works have been accepted. What distinguishes this bride from all the others who have been saved is the acceptance of her righteous works, which equates to the highest level of the covenant. That's why the Holy of Holies thing equals then the marriage covenant. Number two, the second bride, to whom will be introduced in a few chapters, is the bride of Satan. Satan has a bride, you know. Majority of the people on the earth. Unlike the bride of Yeshua, she will be consumed and destroyed by her vile groom, because he won't need her anymore. He'll use them for as long as they're useful, and let them go and be destroyed. Lovely guy that guy is. 11, chapter 11, verse 3 and 4. Revelation chapter 11, verse 3 and 4. And I will give my two witnesses authority to prophesy 1,260 days, being clothed a cloth of sackcloth. These are the two olive trees and two lampstands that stand before the Adon of the whole earth. Okay, ever since this vision was given to John, people have speculated about the identity of these two men. Some believe that it could be Enoch and Elijah, Enoch and Eliyahu. Some say it's Moshe and Eliyahu, or Moses and Elijah. Others say, well, maybe they're modern day prophets. Still others believe they represent nothing more than a concept. In fact, a lot of people think the Bible is nothing more than a concept anyhow. Anyway. But in reality, they are two different individuals, and the way they're described in Revelation indicates that they are just like the prophets of old. Keep your finger there, go to Zechariah chapter 4. Zechariah chapter 4. Start verse 1. We'll read down to verse 14. Zechariah chapter 4, verse 1. And the angel that spoke with me returned and waked me as a man that is awakened out of a sleep. And he said to me, what see you? And I said, I have seen, and behold, a candlestick all of gold with a bowl upon the top of it, and 7 lamps thereon. There are 7 pipes, yes, 7 to the lamps which are upon the top thereof. And 2 olive trees by it, one upon the right side of the bowl, and the other upon the left side thereof. And I answered and spoke to the angel that spoke with me, saying, what are these, my master? Then the angel that spoke with me answered and said unto me, know you not what these are? And I said, no, my master. And then he answered and spoke unto me, saying, this is the word of Yahweh unto Zerubbabel, saying, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, says Yahweh Zebaoth. Who are you, O great mountain, before Zerubbabel? You shall become a plain, and shall bring forth the top stone with shoutings of grace, grace unto it. Moreover, the word of Yahweh came unto me, saying, the hand of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house. His hand shall also finish it. And you shall know that Yahweh Zebaoth hath sent me unto you. For who has despised the day of small things? Even they shall see me with joy, the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel. Even those 7, which are the eyes of Yahweh that run to and fro throughout the whole earth. Then answered I and said unto him, what are these 2 olive trees upon the right side of the candlestick and upon the left side thereof? And I answered and said, answered the second time, and he said unto me, what are these 2 olive branches which are beside the 2 golden spouts that empty the golden oil out of themselves? And he answered me and said, know you not that these are? And I said, no, my master. Then said he, these are the 2 anointed ones that stand by the Adon of the whole earth. Let's go back to Revelation chapter 11. Verse 3 and 4. And I will give my 2 witnesses authority to prophesy 1,260 days, being clothed with sackcloth. These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands that stand before the Adon of the whole earth. Wow. These 2 olive trees represent the full house of Israel, the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom, a true witness from each. Let's go to, let's see what I want to do here. Let's go to Ezekiel 37, verse 15. Ezekiel 37. Ezekiel 37, verse 15. We'll read down to the end of the chapter. Ezekiel 37, verse 15. And the word of Yahweh came unto me, saying, and you, son of man, take you 1 stick, write upon it for Yehuda and for the children of Israel as companions, and take the other stick and write upon it for Yosef, stick of Ephraim, and all of the house of Israel his companions, and join them for you one to another in 1 stick, that they may become one in your hand. And when the children of Israel, when the children of your people shall speak unto you, saying, wilt you not tell us what you mean by these? Say unto them, thus saith Adonai Yahweh, behold, I will take the stick of Yosef, which is the hand of Ephraim, and the tribes of Israel, his companions, and I will put them unto him together with the stick of Yehuda, and make them 1 stick, and they shall be one in my hand. And the sticks whereon you write shall be in your hand, before their eyes. And say unto them, thus saith Adonai Yahweh, behold, I will take the children of Israel from among the nations, where they are gone, and will gather them on every side and bring them into your own land. And I will make them one nation in the land upon the mountains of Israel. And one king shall be unto them, king of all, and they shall be no more two nations. Neither shall they be divided into two kings any more at all. Neither shall they defile themselves any more with their idols, nor with their detestable things, nor with any of their transgressions. But I will save them out of all their dwelling places, wherein they have sinned, and I will cleanse them. So shall they be my people, and I will be their Elohim. And my servant David shall be king over them, and they all shall have one shepherd. They shall also walk in my ordinances, observe my statutes, and do them. And they shall dwell in the land that I have given to Yaakov, my servant, wherein your fathers dwelt, and they shall dwell therein, they and their children's children, forever. And David, my servant, shall be their prince forever. Moreover, I will make a covenant of shalom with them, and it shall be an everlasting covenant with them. And I will establish them and multiply them, and will set my sanctuary in the midst of them forever. My dwelling place also shall be over them. I will be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. And the nations shall know that I am Yahweh, that sanctify Israel, when my sanctuary shall be in the midst of them forever. Forever. Now, if I had the time, I could go into great detail to show that these two witnesses are Moshe and Eliyahu. At the same time, I could also show you that these two witnesses are Enoch and Eliyahu. I can make a good argument. First one better than the second one. Whether it's Enoch, Eliyahu, or Moshe, we need to understand, first of all, that the text here in Revelation does not reveal the names, but it does give us several major clues. Number one, the two witnesses are identified as those who prophesy in verse 3. Okay. I will give my two witnesses the authority to prophesy. Okay. There are three types of prophets in Hebrew understanding. First is the dreamer of dreams. This prophet is usually sent to individuals and gives personal directions, personal directions from God. Daniel, the son of God, is sent to help King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. He's an example of this type of prophet. The prince or Hosea prophet is second time. This prophet is given authority to speak words of encouragement or instruction to communities and congregations, with the obvious example of this type is Hosea. However, the most authoritative prophet, a Navi or Navi'im in the plural, is the responsibility to minister to nations and kings, and this is the kind of prophet referenced in verse 3, chapter 11 of Revelation. A Navi was always present whenever the temple existed in Jerusalem. Indeed, the construction, the dedication of the temple cannot have been accomplished without a Navi, without this kind of a prophet. Moshe, Enoch, and Eliyahu were Navi'im, they were prophets. Any one of these three could be in the running for the two witnesses. Although it's impossible to be absolutely sure, and we will know someday, so let's not be dogmatic of who it is or who does what. But I will say this, and I think we'll stop here in just a moment. The prophets that describe what they're doing is exactly what Moshe did, turning water into blood and all the plagues. Elijah did some things like shut up skies and heavens so it wouldn't rain for 3.5 years. Those are things that are being there. I don't think these are Moshe and Eliyahu, but they are people that are like them. They come in the spirit of Moses and in the spirit of Eliyahu. Just like John the Baptist, he was He was a spinner. He was a prophet of who? The one who prophesied the way of the Lord before the coming? John the Baptist. Okay, so we're going to hit those things in greater detail next week. So next week we'll begin we give one major clue. Next week we'll start with second clue and the third clue, etc. And we're going to see that these prophets really come in the spirit of Elihu, just like John the Baptist came in the spirit of Elijah. He was not Elijah, but he came in the spirit of. And so I believe these, we'll just have to wait and see, because no one knows for sure. But, what I do know is that these people are going to come in the spirit of Moses and Elijah. So let's pray. Abba, Father, it's amazing how you can pack so much information in just a verse or two. It's quite amazing that a 4, 5, 6-year-old can get a grip on salvation. And yet a rocket scientist would be challenged from your word. And only you could do that. Make it that simple, but yet that complex. We know that there's nothing can hold you. There's nothing outside of you. Without you, there'd be no universe. Nothing would stand up from what you spoke and created. Someone has to still carry all these billions and billions and who knows how many other billions of stars and planets out there and hold them in their spot. But yet you care for every little thing that happens to us. You even know when a hair falls off our head. You care when we fall down and skin up our knee. Your loving kindness is incredible. And the world does not understand it. We come before you of having a good grasp on your loving kindness. Because you loved us before we ever loved you. And yet here we are. You chose us to live at such a time as this. To be a light into a world of darkness that's getting darker by the moment. Getting more dangerous by the moment. But yet here we are. And you've given us a job to do. May we be worthy, Father, of that calling. To minister to others. So that they can see the light, your light. And have that hope. No matter what the world around them looks like. Or even feels like, for that matter. So we come before you, Father, ask that you would strengthen us. Give us the strength to be the ambassadors that we are supposed to be. The missionaries that we are supposed to be. Give us words to say, Father, when we need to say them to those who have a willing heart to listen. And even to those who don't, may you give us the right words to speak unto them. Father, again, we just come before you. And thank you, Father, for your healing touch. Spiritually, physically, and mentally. We thank you, Father, that you're concerned of every aspect of our lives, no matter how small or how big, and everything in between. And we lay them, Father, down at your feet. For you know our needs, our desires, and our wants. So, Father, again, we just come before you, thanking you and loving you. And we give you all the praise and honor and glory in Yeshua's name. Amen and amen.